Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is extra special because we're not going to be just talking about how to help when your teen is struggling with mental health issues and depression, but we actually get to talk with a teenager who has journeyed through that exact scenario. Who is she? Shannon Monet is a 16-year-old who's extremely focused and desires to make a positive impact on today's teens as well as the next generation. Shannon has found her value and her purpose, and she believes that no one should be left alone or feel alone, and she wants her story to help the lost find their identity and purpose, as there are currently so many suffering from suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, fear, and more. Shannon is using her voice through social media, graphic design, and capturing visuals on YouTube to be light in a dark world. Welcome to the podcast, Shannon.
Thank you for having me.
It is so great to have you here. I think you might be, outside of my own kids, I think you might be my youngest guest ever. So that is super fun.
Really?
Yeah, I really think so. So that's so fun to get to have a teenager on the show. And as I said there in the introduction, to not only talk about how we can help our teens, but to be actually talking with a teen who has walked this journey is very exciting to me. And Shannon, when you first reached out to me, I was so captivated by three different things. Number one was your professional approach and your willingness to actually reach out. Like, you are very mature and grown up and professional, and you have excellent communication skills, especially for your age. And secondly, your engaging YouTube videos. I went and took a look at those, and they are so fun and just absolutely captivating, packed with value. Plus, you're adorable and just very engaging on top of all that. And then number three, Shannon, was your personal story itself is so incredible, and it's so impactful that you're willing to share that. So I'd like to just start right there. If you would walk us through your personal story and just kind of share about how did it lead you down the path of wanting to help other teens and parents?
First, thank you for the compliments. I really appreciate it. And my story, I moved to this new school for 4th and 5th grade, and it was a total shift from the atmosphere of my previous school that I was at, and it was less welcoming, less diverse, and it was really no love there. And I was the new girl who was unique and different, and they saw that. So that caused me to be instantly rejected and alone. For years, I was the kid in the playground that no one wanted to play with or talk to. I was the kid who sat alone. I was the kid who was bullied and teased. And everyone always pointed out my flaws and imperfections. And I was the outcast. And the more I tried to live up to their standards, the more I tried to please them and mask who I was, the more they could see past who I really was. Inside and out, I lost myself, and I didn't even know who I was. I couldn't recognize the person who I saw in the mirror every day, and the light inside of me that I carried as a little girl grew dim. The boldness that I once carried turned into fear, anxiety, and depression. And over time, after carrying that unhappiness, suicidal thoughts developed in my mind. It was one time where I thought I had friends, but in reality, they backstabbed me, talking about me negatively behind my back, which made me hurt even more, leaving me more lonely. And every negative statement they said about me, I heard it and I accepted it. Every word shaped my false identity, and I gave them that right. It was so painful to see everyone else with their friends as I went day by day, alone, set apart from the others. I felt worthless, so I turned to music, thinking that it would satisfy me and fill that longing in my heart to not feel alone and to feel love. The type of artists I listened to experienced different feelings like me, like depression and suicidal thoughts, and I was not aware of what doorways I was opening up. I was constantly listening to the lyrics that said I'm depressed, I want to end my life, and I was feeding my spirit with that. Other than music, I tried to cope by going into toxic friendships with people outside of the school, and even in a room full of people, I still felt lonely. So there were so many areas in which I was searching for peace. However, what I thought was bringing me peace was really only temporary. I wanted an eternal peace. Listening to depressing artists, having toxic friendships, that only helped me for a temporary amount of time. But I found myself getting more and more depressed. And I realized what was really keeping me here and pulling me through was talking to God. The times where I truly had peace was during recess. I used to talk to God and I quieted the noise around me like it was only me and Him. It was a running track on the playground, and I used to walk there and I just talked to God. I didn't care what was around me, who saw me, who heard me, and it was an everyday thing that I've done. And always lost track of time by doing that. But on one night, on July 18th, 4 years ago, I was 11 and I wanted to end my life. I grew up tired looking at myself. I didn't like my skin complexion. I felt worthless, invisible, and not important. I was tired of being the kid who was rejected. I was tired of being different, and I was tired of being depressed every day. I felt like I had no one to turn to. I was tired, and I wished that I was someone else or either dead. My hope was really gone, and I tried hiding that pain in front of my family, and it was really at that moment when I started to doubt God, even questioning, like, are you even real? And if He was real, why did He make me different? Why didn't He make me like everyone else in my school? I didn't want to be the kid who was labeled as different. I was tired of living in this skin. I just wanted it all to be over. I didn't want to be me anymore. I thought, what's the point of even living? I didn't want to keep going on with the pain. I didn't know how I would end life. I just wanted to do it. So I ended up crying in my bedroom, and my mother was in the other room folding clothes, and I suddenly heard footsteps, so I dried my tears so that she wouldn't see that I was crying. She came over to me and she started praying for me. She didn't hear that I was crying, and she didn't know that I had been through all that at school. So I knew this was nothing but God. I knew that He was real from that moment. But when she started praying for me, God showed her a vision of me sitting alone at the lunch table. And when she told me that I could do nothing but cry, because I never told her, like, I'm going through all of this at school. I never told her the bullying that I went through. It was all a secret. I just kept it to myself, and I just told God. So it was really at that night where God revealed to me that He was with me the entire time, and He used my mother as a vessel to speak to me. If she never went in my room that night, I would have died by suicide. And if I died by suicide that night, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Wow, Shannon, I'm sitting here like with goosebumps and on the verge of tears, because I think your story is so relatable. I think it's relatable to a lot of moms who actually have felt many years back as they were in school, felt the way that you felt and experienced the things that you experienced, and parents today that have kids walking through that same thing. Because it is hard. The world today is full of darkness and evil, and gosh, so many things you spoke about, from people bullying and being mean and saying things and planting seeds which put beliefs in your heart and your mind. And it's like there's so many broken and hurt people out there, and you probably heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. And I think a lot of times these kids are saying and doing these things out of hurt, out of brokenness, out of jealousy. I really believe that the reality is that nobody has a perfect life and nobody has a perfect home, and these kids are going home to broken homes and they're hurting, and it's coming out of them as harsh, terrible words, and it's planting seeds in people like you and so many other of our youth. It's incredible to me, but not surprising to see God's hand on your life throughout your whole story, and how beautiful that He worked through your mother. As a parent, that gives me so much hope to know the power of prayer, and to know that even though our kids are hurting and walking through hard things, that prayer is still so powerful, and that it works, and that it can be used as such a good vessel and a good tool. I'm curious, Shannon, you talked a lot about God's hand on your life, and I'm curious, growing up, with your parents, were you guys in church? Was it your parents that kind of planted those good seeds in you to where you knew about God? Were you in church a lot? What did that kind of look like for you?
Yes, I was in church my entire life since I was a baby, and so are my parents. So God has always been in my life, but like during those times when I was struggling with depression, I started to really doubt Him. I'm like, are you even real? Because even though I heard all these stories about Him and everything, it was still a part of me that didn't believe it. But yes, God has always been in my life, and those seeds have always been planted.
That's so beautiful. And again, that gives me hope, just to know that parents, as we're taking our kids to church and pouring into them and reading scripture and quoting scripture and and playing Christian music and talking about Christian values, all that stuff is also planting seeds in our kids to combat some of those dark seeds that are being planted as well. And I believe that Jesus and the truth and the light will always overcome the darkness. And so, just side note and encouragement to the parents to keep planting those seeds, keep praying for your kids, keep taking them to church, because it really does matter. So Shannon, you talked about the night that all of this kind of went down, and that your mom was praying for you, and that God gave her this vision. Would you say that really was a major turning point? Was that the turning point for you?
Oh, yes, it was. After that moment, I realized, okay, I do have purpose and God is real. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do whatever you need me to do. And it took me like about a good 3 years to get into this field of what I do now. And it's really all because of him, because honestly, I'm really shy and I honestly don't like doing things like this, but I know that God has called me to it, so you have to do it, you know. So
I love that, Shannon. I gotta tell you a secret. God will sometimes use the very thing that is not your favorite thing, or that you feel afraid of, or that you feel like you're not equipped for. He will so often use that for good. I speak from that with firsthand experience. Public speaking is very outside of my comfort zone, and God called me to step into that, to reach people and to share his message. And I see him doing the same thing with you. And it's so cool, because it's like we have to rely on him and his strength, and trust and believe that he's going to equip us to carry that out, because we could not possibly do that on our own, right? Do you feel that?
I can't do it on my own at all. No.
Oh my gosh, I see him just so at work in you, and putting this passion and this purpose and this identity of being his child inside of you, Shannon, and it's so very beautiful. You really spoke a lot about some of these issues that our teens may be struggling with today, and I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the things that our teens are struggling with today, the mental health and the depression and the anxiety, that like a lot of this is going on behind closed doors. Do you feel like that's true?
Yes. A lot of teens are often struggling with like issues to identify themselves, or self-esteem, body image, and also social media can play a big role in this, because it leads to comparison and unrealistic expectations. Also, bullying online and off can also be a major source of depression. Additionally, teens are dealing with stress with academic pressure or family dynamics that can contribute to mental health issues. And all these factors can lead to a feeling of isolation and confusion. So this causes teens to feel overwhelmed and unable to cope with their emotions.
That's so good. And you mentioned social media. I feel like that's kind of its own beast, so to speak. Social media can be used for good, but I think that it can also be used for so much harm. How do you and your family handle social media, Shannon? Like, do you have it on your phone? Do you engage with it?
Oh yes, I engage with it. So I try not to get like too tied into it. But I like release my stuff out there on social media, and then I like get off, or I reach out to people on there who I see who are hurting. So I try to use it in a good way instead of like a bad way, like looking at other people like, oh, I want to live like them, or I want to do this, I want to do that, where I compare myself. So we try to have like a positive outlook on it instead of looking at the negative.
That's so good. And I love that tip about just stopping the scroll, just being very intentional on social media, to get on, to do whatever you're going to do, to post whatever you're going to post, or maybe to look for an important piece of information. A parent, as a parent, I know that a lot of communication happens through social media. And so sometimes we need to get on and engage in that way, but being really intentional. And it sounds to me too, like you have really strong boundaries around social media, Shannon. And I'm curious too, how is your mom, or how are your parents involved in your social media usage?
My mom is just very involved. Like, she helps me balance my life, because I'm still learning how to balance. It's something that's a weakness I have, and she's helping me in that area. Like, okay, let's set time for this, and then let's set time for that. And she just helps me to stay balanced. Having that balance is very important.
That's so good. So what I hear is just her being very involved. And parents, our kids may act like sometimes that they're annoyed, or like they want total freedom and they want to be able to just use their cell phone 24/7. But I really think that the truth is that our kids need and actually want us to be involved and to help them set healthy boundaries. And like Shannon was talking about, that balance, and they can't do that on their own yet. They need us to be involved and engaged and equipping them to walk through that in a way that's full of wisdom. Speaking again of the parents, Shannon, can you talk to me about some warning signs that as parents we could just be looking for and aware of when it comes to our teens and their mental health?
Yes, so parents should be aware of any sudden changes in their teen's behavior, such as withdrawing from activities that they once enjoyed, or changes in eating or sleeping habits, or sudden outbursts of anger or sadness. And other signs to look out for is a decrease in academic performance, or changes in relationships with friends, or a lack of interest in personal grooming. And another important sign is that a depressed teen may not always look or act depressed. They may be outgoing or talkative or happy. And some teens do this out of their power to cover up or mask what they're experiencing out of fear and judgment. So it's important for parents to be aware of these signs and to talk to their teens if they observe any of them.
That's so good. I love that. Just being aware. You know,
Yes.
if we are engaged and aware parents, we're going to be able to tell. I really feel like if there are warning signs, if there are things like Shannon mentioned, if things are drastically changing, and I really think at the bottom of this, it comes down to just being involved, being engaged, having those tough conversations, and letting our kids know that we're a safe space, letting our kids know that we're on their team and we're cheering them on, and we are for them. We're for their success. We are for their happiness. Ultimately, we are here to help guide them in their faith and help them walk in wisdom. And so I'm not necessarily talking about like being a best friend with your kid or with your teen, because you should be the parent, not necessarily the best friend. But I still think it's important to let them know that we're on the same team, walking towards the same end goal together. And so Shannon really shared some great things to look for. And speaking of that, being on their team and cheering them on and helping to guide them, Shannon, how else can parents effectively minister to young people who are dealing with these type of situations? Like, do you have any tips or effective ways for helping teens to cope?
Yes, kind of like what you were saying, one of the most important things is that parents can, what they can do is be supportive, understanding, and present. Teens need to know that their parents are there for them no matter what, and that they are not being judged. They need a parent or a leader's presence. They need you to be there beside them as they cry, vent, or even if they say nothing at all. It is also important to create that open dialogue so teens can talk about their feelings and ask questions. And also try being patient with them and allow room for the complicated and the big emotions, inviting them to help you understand what they're feeling. And while listening, try not to label their emotions like as dramatic or saying, you don't have anything to be depressed about, you're blessed, etc., which is something that actually happens a lot in my generation because teens feel like that they can't discuss with their parents because they can't discuss their feelings with their parents because they downplay the emotions that they are going through, and it makes them not want to share anything because they don't feel understood, which really breaks my heart. So I definitely suggest that you validate their emotions and thank them for sharing even if you disagree. And also lastly, build them up by praying for them, asking God to be present, and turning scriptures into weapons of prayer, encouraging them, because depression has a funny way of making it seem like you are nothing and you aren't doing anything right. So yes.
Those are so good. Okay, a few things that you shared there just really struck a chord with me. You talked about making sure that they don't feel like there's judgment coming from us. And I think that's really important so that our teens feel safe to share openly with us. Sometimes as parents, we have a tendency to interrupt. Shannon, have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, a few times.
Man, we want to interrupt. We want to come in and save the day. We want to give our opinion and we want to give you all the tips and all the advice, when what it sounds to me like is that what sometimes you guys as teens really need is just for us to listen.
Yes.
Yes, to ask good questions, open-ended questions, and just really listen and be patient and give you guys the time to share everything that's on your heart. Our generation, I'm technically, I guess, a millennial. Our generation's attention span is really like that of a goldfish, which is ridiculous and sad, but true. And I have found that I have to be very intentional at listening, no matter who I'm having conversation with, but especially with my kids, because if they're sharing on and on and on, I really need to make sure that I am listening attentively and focused, that I'm not, in a million other places in my brain, that I'm not worrying about what am I making for dinner and what's on tomorrow's, homeschool agenda and who needs to run where tonight, but that I'm actually really focused and giving my full attention and that I'm really listening to my team, because gosh, I really do want to be that safe space. And I love what you shared about thanking them for sharing what's on their heart, and also just validating their emotions. This really resonates with me as I have a 14, almost 15-year-old daughter. And we've been talking about driver's ed and her driver's test that's coming up. And we had a conversation the other day. She got really frustrated at me because she was telling me how she's scared. And I kind of did exactly what you were talking about. I'm like, you might be scared, but you're a great driver. It's going to be okay. You can totally do this. And she said, Mom, all I really want and need you to say is that, Chloe, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel scared. That's valid. And so, holy smokes, what you just shared really resonated, that we don't always have to add to it and carry on and give our advice like we, want to do, but just to listen and just validate and thank them and love them and let them know it's okay to feel that way. And I'm here for you and I'm on your team. Does that sound like kind of what you're saying?
Yes, it does.
Yes. So good. So good. Okay. So throughout the episode today, Shannon, we've really been talking to the parents, but if there happened to be a teen listening into this episode today and they were struggling with mental health issues or depression right now, what would you say to that teenager?
Well, what I would say to that teenager is you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that there is nothing wrong with you. You are beautiful. You are handsome. No matter what people have told you, no matter what social media has said, no matter what you have told yourself, you are loved and you have worth. Most importantly, God loves you and He is always with you, even in the darkest of times. And I know it gets hard. I know it is a battle, but you can make it. You are more than a conqueror. So don't be afraid to reach out for help. Talk to your parents, talk to a counselor, a pastor. It's okay to ask for help. It doesn't make you weak. We need each other.
That is so beautiful. And just to hear that from you, a fellow teenager, I could see that being really powerful and well received, just to hear from someone else who has walked that walk, that it's okay to reach out for help and you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Sometimes as the parents, we can tell our kids that, but sometimes they need to hear it from a peer. So thank you so much for sharing that, Shannon. I just want to end the episode today by asking, where can listeners follow your journey and connect with you?
Well, they can connect with me by going to my website, shannonmonet.com, or my Instagram at shannonmonet_.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. You were a wealth of knowledge today, and I just appreciate your willingness to share openly and vulnerably and from your heart. You're full of wisdom, and what you're doing is going to make a huge impact on the world. So thank you for being here today, Shannon.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, sweet friends, what a fantastic and impactful episode today. Be sure and share this with your fellow mom friends who have teenagers, because this is a message that as parents, we all need to hear. And I think it's something that, our teens are all walking through hard things. And so I know that there was something inside of today's episode that Shannon shared that would be beneficial for every single mom of a teenager that you know. So please share today's episode. And until we meet again, keep on living and loving with deep faith and great joy.